Hi everyone, I'm Daniel, and we've reached the final video in this series detailing how each class gets clues using events. It's been a fun deep dive into what makes each class distinct, and we discovered that both Guardians and Rogues get clues while dealing with enemies, while Survivors like to modify or react to the investigate action itself. This was a bit risky doing this while the Drowned City was being released, and it's been actually several months since I did the last video, but we only missed out on one card, Unconventional Method from the Survivor class. Thankfully, it too modifies the investigate action, and just like winging it and fortuitous discovery, also provides some discard pile synergy. So, what better place to end our series than the champions of clue discovery itself, the Seeker class? The first question, of course, is why even bother with events when every seeker excels at getting clues with just their high base intellect stat and strong assets that bump the number up even further? Why not save some of that deck space that events take up and just spam the basic investigate action? Well, clearly the designers have some answers for us since there are 8 events that perform an investigate action and 12 others that discover a clue in other ways. We'll get into those in more detail shortly, but playing events can be synergistic with other cards in your deck. One secret card that nearly all of these events benefit from is Farsight, a level 4 card that is one of my favorites, as it can play an event directly without spending an action, effectively giving you another action for something else and also avoiding an attack of opportunity. All of these cards are insights as well, so Cryptic Grimoire, the one of those versions of the upgraded ones, can also fit the bill for much the same effect. Now, let's not forget the newly released Agatha Crane, who can also play some events from her discard pile, which is a nice bit of recursion that also doesn't cost an action. And Joe Diamond doesn't even really have the opportunity cost of adding events to his deck since he gets a side deck, his Hunch deck, of 10 insights that can even be played at a -2 resource discount. Even without these other pieces in your deck, Seekers in general have the draw capabilities to churn through their decks and see these powerful events more quickly, and with deck cycling, maybe even more than once. When it comes down to it, events should have a bigger impact on the game than a basic action does, and while getting clues doesn't always need to happen with urgency or speed, sometimes getting burst clues will win you the scenario when a basic investigate was just a bit too slow. Finally, I'll mention that these cards are not just for main class seekers. Most of the cards you will see today are level 0 or a little bit higher. We do have a full set of investigators who get the level 0 to 2 seeker cards unconditionally, and Luke Robinson especially is interested, and plenty more that can splash enough into seeker who will want to consider these events, again, even without any other event synergy. So, let's get into the cards. We'll first talk about the events that are a type of investigate action. There are some benefits to that. A magnifying glass still boosts the test. You still get a resource from Dr. Milan Christopher. You still get to trigger scavenging. But the card needs to do something much more than that to be worth a deck slot. Since you are using a card, though, you can use Crafty to get a skill boost, which is welcome since none of the cards you're going to see give any boosts whatsoever, and any cost reduction either, so this is much more of an appealing way to make the event lifestyle affordable. Okay, let's get started with Burning the Midnight Oil over here on the left. This is a good card that works in essentially any deck as a replacement for Emergency Cash. Getting just one clue is fine. The basic investigate is much better than a basic fight, so it's not surprising that this one sees play, but Clean Them Out, the Guardian version of just dealing 1 damage, rarely does. Over here on the right, you're going to see Correlate all its contents. There's synergy for 3 archetypes here. You have the Precision archetype that wants you to succeed by exactly some number. The Canceling Tokens archetype, which is really just for Agatha Crane right now. And then Secrets or Charges. It's hard not to have a good target to add secrets or charges to these days, and adding 2 really is a lot, and 1 isn't bad. It's kind of like a level 0 Enraptured. You of course still get your clue. But don't sleep on the token redrawing effect. Especially early in a campaign, you can try to just beat the test by 2 or 3 on standard. And if you do end up drawing a worse token, like a -4 or the auto fail, you just get to redraw the token, and that potentially saves you a skill card or some other resource to try to cover the bag entirely on your first go. Next, we have Seeking Answers level 0, and on the right, level 2. The level 0 version of the card was the first card in this part of the list that got released entirely in the whole card game. Its premise is pretty simple. Use your shroud instead of a connecting location shroud to get a clue, making the test easier and saving you from moving into that location. Who knows, maybe there's a bunch of enemies at the location, even a locked door. In Rex Murphy, who came out in the set, it's even better because since it's still an investigate action, if you do end up succeeding by 2, you'll still get a clue from your current location too. That's more or less what the upgrade does, which is also in the revised core. Get 2 total clues instead of 1, and you can spread them out across your location and any connecting locations. It's a neat utility card that goes even harder in any investigators with extra movement tricks, so that they reveal more locations with clues on them before wanting to play this card. Speaking of which, Deciphered Reality on the left, this is a level 3 card, a level 5 card that threatens to get an enormous amount of clues. Or you get nothing if you pull the auto fail on this big test, but if you do want to risk it, see that if you can reveal 4 or 5 locations first, maybe more, and then take the big test. You'll get 1 clue from every revealed location, plus the normal one from your own location through the investigate action. Sometimes people forget that it still gets that 1 clue. People are pretty down on this card since it is really expensive and kind of awkward to set up, but wouldn't it be fun to play this twice in one round with Agatha Crane? You can do that now. On the right, it's kind of a similar card. Seekers really do like getting a lot of clues with 1 action. This one actually is 2 actions for testing sprint. It's a bit of an inverse Deciphered Reality. You still want a lot of revealed locations, but they need to be connecting to your own. This time, instead of just 1 big test, you'll need to do the equivalent of a basic investigate at your location and each connecting location in shroud order, even if they don't have any clues. For its value at level 0 and just 1 resource, it's better than Deciphered Reality, but it still is a little awkward to set up. Unless you're Luke Robinson. And it is a little silly with Amanda Sharp, who loves taking as many tests as possible. You might also want to think about using Written in the Stars to make this even better. Next up, we have Unearth the Ancients 2 on the left. This card is for our asset-heavy friends. Don't forget that, again, unlike the level 0 version of the card, which is not on this list, you still do discover a clue at your own location. You're essentially combining 2 play actions and some cost reduction into 1 investigate, possibly getting some card draw out of it too. It's really, really strong for setting up your board without waiting to make progress on the scenario objectives, since you still get that clue. On the right, we're looking at Uncanny Growth, which isn't a normal event. This one is bonded to the Ravenous Myconids. I include it just out of completeness, but again, also a reminder that it still discovers a clue while powering up your mushroom friend. Okay, let's move on to the cards that discover clues without the investigate action. I've said this before, but I'll say it again. Even the highest intellect seekers can get tripped up by a locked door, and having a way to get clues without investigating is valuable, especially at lower player counts where your efforts can solve a particularly troublesome location for good. Nearly all of these cards we're going to see are testless to begin with, which is useful just to avoid pulling a chaos token, especially on a high shroud location. Now, you probably don't need to overload your deck with this kind of effect, especially as a seeker. You can just basic investigate most of the time, but depending on your deck, you could probably stand to have 1 or 2 of these cards in your deck. Okay, this is the original clue getting event, Working a Hunch. Over there on the left, this is from the core set, level 0, 2 resources for a clue, whenever you want it, without an action. It's an excellent rate that other cards probably need to measure up to. On higher player counts, I don't think it sees as much play anymore because just 1 clue probably isn't enough if you're going to bother sticking it into a deck. Great, you got one clue. Now, how are you going to, pick up the rest of the clues on that location that maybe still has a locked door on it? It's certainly not bad. The fact that it doesn't cost an action is huge. Especially in fast cycling decks that get to play each copy many times, it's sort of the basis of a few infinite decks. It's still worth a look in some investigators at any player count. Joe Diamond in particular gets to put it in his hunch deck, so it doesn't cost anything in terms of resources. And in Trish and Daryl, it's an interesting way to trigger their investigator abilities. Now, in the Drowned City, we just got an upgrade over there on the right that lets you discover a clue from any revealed location, 2 XP. I'm less high on this card than other ways of getting clues remotely just because of its cost. It does a reasonable testless fast impression of seeking answers level 0, but for its experience points, I'm more likely to upgrade into something like Farsight to make all of my events happen for no action. It's certainly not bad, but it feels a bit like a luxury upgrade than added functionality. I went through a whole solo Joe Diamond campaign recently, and I had, of course, the level 0 card in my deck, but I never was tempted to put the level 2 version in my deck. And that's in solo, where you might think that would be the best case for this kind of card. Okay, moving on, we have control variable on the left, and hey, it's working a hunch again, but for curse decks. It's a whole resource discount for less flexibility of when to play it. Because of the curse trait, it's nice that some investigators who can't play Working a Hunch can play this, but otherwise it's in a very similar spot to me. Over on the right though, Stirring Up Trouble, if you still want to play a curse deck, but one clue isn't enough, great, it's our first 2 clue event. Getting more than 1 clue for an event is a much, much better deal for the card slot. You'll gladly spend the action compared to control variable. Recall that the 1 clue events in the first section of this video gave you more than just a single clue. It gave you extra charges or secrets. It gave you something like a clue from a different location. It gave you, all kinds of things that you might actually want in that deck, like some resources. Now, the curse side of this card is interesting too, since the cost, how many curses you put in the bag, scales for the shroud of your location. Ideally, you want testless clues on a high shroud location, because they're hard to investigate otherwise, but you'll pay for that later on with added curse tokens. But maybe a lot of curses in the bag is exactly what you want with the rest of the synergy in your team or your own deck. Note that if the bag is already full or close to being full and you can't pay that additional cost, you can't play the card. So it might be a dead card in some circumstances. If you really like getting 2 clues, but you don't want to play curses, extensive research, also known as expensive research, is the primo way to get 2 testless clues in Seeker. It will cost you a lot, but it fits into the big hand archetype well, and another shout out here to Farsight for a good target for an event to play with that card. I'm not usually playing this card for more than 4 resources, which is the going rate for 2 testless clues in other classes. Like Rogue has Intel Report, and that costs 4 for 2 clues at your own location. Ideally with this card though, you play it for 2 resources, maybe 1 or 0 in some really nice circumstances. Now, let's look at Connect the Dots. This combines the fast and discover 2 clues part of the last couple of sets of cards. So we're getting a lot of clues with this 1 card, but you also have to pay a lot, which is continuing with the expensive trend from the last slide. When I talk up event cards in general, I really like them because they're big and flashy. They do something to advance the board state with my one card in hand. Connect the Dots really fits the bill. Like Deciphered Reality, it's tricky to set up and benefits from an investigator who cares about extra movement. So it can be a little bit tough to get full value or even play the card in the first place. But I'm a big fan of the card because I like these big effects, and it can really save you on backtracking if you don't want to do that. It's a bit of a card that needs some help though. I'd love to see a level 2 or higher version in the future. The other two cards on this slide are on the trail level 1 and 3. I talked about these cards already when I did the Guardian version of this video at the beginning of the series. They're worth a mention here while I'm talking about how much the Secret card pool has movement as an archetype. I think that Monterey Jack, Ursula Downs, these are all investigators who might actually want all the cards you see on this slide. You could use On the Trail to set up Deciphered Reality, or connect the dots here. The card does, I think, still fit in better with the Guardian class as far as the enemy part goes, but Seekers aren't completely helpless if they end up in a location with an enemy. In fact, they might just play another event, like maybe one of these. We have on the left Confound. This is an extremely powerful card. This one just came out in Feast of Hemlock Vale recently. It is a parlay, so this is something Alessandra could do from out of class, but it combines the ability to keep an enemy exhausted for 2 rounds with discovering 2 clues. That's a lot of action compression, especially considering you don't even need to engage the enemy. It could be an aloof enemy. Now, you still do have to take a test, which is different from all the other cards we've seen so far, but since it's not an investigate, you won't be interacting with the shroud of the location either. Instead, you'll be testing against the evade value of the chosen enemy, basically like the rogue card Eavesdrop that we saw in a previous video. There's a lot to like here. Honestly, again, the action compression reminds me of Unearth the Ancients 2. You don't give up the progress you're making in the scenario by dealing with the enemy. This is definitely worth a card slot in the investigators who might be dealing with enemies or doing parlay tricks altogether. On the right, we have another kind of version of this. It's another event that creates a test but isn't an investigation. There sure were a lot of clue discovery events in Feast of Hemlock Vale. Anyway, it's a bit of a baby version of Confound, since it evades the enemy, gets you a clue, and yeah, you do get a clue on the evade itself, but has this fun upside that we haven't really seen anywhere else. The enemy becomes massive and cannot move, so you might have just dealt with that enemy permanently. Seeker really has no shortage of ways to deal with enemies these days, and this is really one of the best ones, especially at level 0. And then lastly, all this talk about getting 2 clues on an event being so good, why not get 3 clues? Yeah, 3 clues! What's the rest of this card, Gastly Revelation, say? Okay, well, being defeated is not really what you want to do in this game. You'd like to play out the rest of your turns. There are some scenarios where this isn't the worst thing to happen, but I think for the card slot, you can do a lot better. Okay, well, that is it. Those are all of the Seeker cards that get 1 or more clues, which again was a higher number than we saw from any other class in this series. There isn't a huge theme here with the Seeker events like those other classes. Since it's already the clue-focused class, the events really just supplement your ability to get clues with some other neat effects, again, like Burning the Midnight Oil, getting some resources, getting extra clues with some of those automatically discover events. With the investigation events, it's maybe a little bit more attuned to adding together another play action, or maybe you're getting something remotely too. Although you get that with the second batch as well. I think they're meant to help you power through some of these locations a bit faster by getting extra clues or maybe dealing with some of these enemies that might be there. Now, none of the cards, I would say, are required for a good clue-getting Seeker deck, but you'll never be unhappy to see them in your build. And as mentioned before, they shine particularly brightly in Investigators or decks that have synergy with events, and maybe some movement as well, since so many of these events are focused on getting clues remotely or moving you through the map. All right. We have reached the end of our clue-getting event journey. To me, events occupy an interesting space in the game. As a one-time effect, they'd better be worth it over what your investigator can do with their assets and base stats. But assets aren't always a reasonable option for some builds. For one, they're pretty action-intensive to play, and they might not pay off. Consider, say, a basic flashlight. Was it really worth it to get clues if you don't get all 3 clues off of it? That's 4 actions, 1 to play, and then 3 more for each of those investigates. You'd probably be better off with an event to get those clues directly. Imagine if you just had 2 events that got 2 clues each. That's 4 clues for just 2 actions. And there's also the slot pressure. If your hand slots are already full, say from having a two-handed weapon build because you're really more focused on enemy management in your deck, the clues you pick up are better off coming from events anyway, because you can't just probably basic investigate your way to getting those clues. Now, the downside, of course, are the limited uses for the events. You play it, goes in the discard pile, you might not see it again. Evidence, though, for example, is no good if you need the clue now and there's no enemy to kill. So some of the events have some kind of play restriction on them that makes them a bit tougher to get out. But, don't despair. Many of these events have excellent icons to commit to an investigate test if there's no chance that it gets played in its usual way by the end of the scenario. But in general, I like to think about my role on the team when thinking about the balance between assets and events. If I mainly get clues, a few fight events to keep in my back pocket is better than proactively playing a weapon that will rarely get used. And if I mainly fight, I don't have the time to play assets that will help me investigate, but a few clues will be useful for the scenario, and I can get them via a few events. Of course, a lot of Arkham decks are going to be somewhere in the middle. You're not fully getting clues, you're not fully getting dealing with enemies, so that's where the fun in deck building really is. It's sometimes hard in this deck building phase to foresee the need for the events described in this series, especially the Seeker ones here, but putting in a few splashy events in particular that get clues in some interesting ways will make a difference in leading your group to victory. That's all. Thank you for watching and for all of your support on the channel recently. If you've enjoyed this series, please hit the like button and maybe leave me a comment letting me know what kind of in-depth card pool investigation you'd like to see a series about next. And then I'll see you in the next video, hopefully in that particular series. Bye!